Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Joe Biden will.
Joe Biden has won the American presidential election.
We did it, Joe.
He will become the 46th president-elect
of the United States.
That Kamala Harris will become the first woman vice president, first woman of colour in such a lofty position in America.
Events in Washington have taken a violent and tumultuous turn in the past few hours.
Protesters tried to break through the barrier to storm the building.
I think people are stunned, shocked, amazed.
Thousands of supporters of President Trump stormed the US Capitol building, venting their anger at the victory of Joe Biden.
On 20th January 2021, Joe Biden was sworn in as the 46th President of America. He faces an uphill task of uniting a divided America, rebuilding its coalitions, and restoring trust with allies. But what does a new president in the post-Trump era mean for the future of a world which is more skeptical of the US than ever before in history?
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt,
Lyndon Baines Johnson, Richard Milhous Nixon,
Barack Hussein Obama,
Donald John Trump.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The first challenge for Biden will be uniting a divided country along with battling the pandemic. The vaccination drive requires close coordination between federal, state, and local bureaucracies. Biden has already announced a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package and signaled the US intention to rejoin WHO. How exactly Biden manages domestic affairs will have a huge consequence for the world. Which brings us to Europe.
Trade wars may be underway.
And then the U.S. is slapping a 25% tariff on other products, including Irish and Scotch whiskey.
European powers fear that Trump may have gone, but Trumpism is here to stay. Most of Trump's decisions regarding Europe are expected to be reversed under Biden, from the removal of troops in Germany, the tariff imposed on EU exports, and the negligence of NATO. But some say the damage has already been done. Europe finalizing an investment agreement with China reflects Europe's growing rift with the US and its developing mindset of how to work not just with the American power but also against it on matters such as climate change and trade.
The trade war took a dangerous turn.
Nearly $80 billion is for manufactured goods like cars.
It's all-out economic warfare.
Economy is the basis of hegemony in international relations. China, unlike the USSR, which lagged considerably from the United States, is already the largest economy in terms of PPP and is skillfully increasing its economic diplomacy, as seen in its Belt and Road Initiative. A Thucydides trap is emerging. A Thucydides trap is a tendency towards war when an emerging power threatens to displace an existing great power. The US has been witnessing this, but can't push its allies to choose between security relations with the US versus economic relations with China. Decoupling, as the US would like it, isn't possible. While leaving office, Trump made sure to classify China's handling of Uyghurs as genocide.
The United States leveling perhaps the most serious charge.
And Donald Trump has signed a bill condemning China for its human rights abuses against its Uyghur.
The new US Secretary of State under Biden, Anthony Blinken, has carried this sentiment forward, conveying that he considers the Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs as genocide. Biden may continue Trump's hardline on China, but with closer coordination with its allies. Further north, the START treaty with Russia, the last remaining check on the two biggest nuclear arsenals in the world, will expire this February. The first point of action under Biden is to extend this treaty with them, without which both the countries will be free to deploy their nuclear warheads.
Washington also warned Americans to leave Iraq immediately. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad was closed.
Relations between the United States and Iran have soured significantly.
The US pulled out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action or the Iran nuclear deal under Trump and reimposed harsh economic sanctions, saying the deal was unfair to America. Iran's economy, which rose by 12.3% after the nuclear deal, was badly hit by these new sanctions. While the world was still recovering from a no-Iran deal, something else happened.
Qasem Soleimani
has been killed.
Iran has threatened harsh retaliation against the U.S.
Ayatollah Ali Khamenei labeled the Western powers as untrustworthy.
Military troops arriving in the Middle East amid the growing crisis with Iran.
Relations between Iran and US reached a new low. Iran restarted its nuclear program, seized oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and secretly staged an attack on the refinery of Aramco, Saudi Arabia's publicly controlled oil company, hoping to put pressure on the US to remove its sanctions. The outgoing president in response imposed more sanctions on Iran. Biden has promised Iran a credible path back to the old deal, but if he goes for a new nuclear deal, he may have to concede more. Despite the current sanctions, Iranian oil sales are back on the rise, which gives Tehran a greater leverage in negotiating a new nuclear program with the US. And this brings us to Afghanistan.
The US and the Afghan Taliban have just signed a long-awaited deal aimed at paving the way to peace and the departure of foreign troops.
Since 9/11, the main objective of US is to ensure the stability of Afghanistan so that its territory isn't used for exporting terrorism. The US-Taliban Doha Agreement, signed under Trump last February, requires the US to pull out all of its forces by 1st May 2021. But NATO allies don't want a US military exit that fails to lift their troops. In this context, Biden has three options: withdraw all US forces as scheduled by May 1st, pulling out of the accord and maintaining an indefinite US military presence, or ask the Taliban for an extension of the withdrawal deadline. If the Taliban doesn't agree to an extension, which it probably won't, the Biden administration will be left with the choice of either pulling out anyway, risking a collapse of the Afghan state with a fresh civil war and new refugee flows, or remain involved in the forever war. All depends on whether the Biden administration sees Afghanistan in isolation or considers it within the larger strategic and geopolitical dimensions. The fix America finds itself in, realizing the gravity of its own domestic problems while wanting to get back to the same uncontested stature it used to enjoy, is greater than the mere contestation over global leadership. It's about the very future of the post-Cold War global order.